Hey, I'm Pastor John. Thank you so much for tuning in to this sermon today. If there's something impactful in the sermon today, something that really speaks to you from God's Word, I encourage you to leave a note in the comment and let us know what God's speaking to you through it. And I hope you enjoy this sermon from God's Word today.
So we are continuing our series, Here Comes the Kingdom. We're in the book of Matthew. We've been there for over a year and a half now, just looking at what Matthew has to say about Jesus' arrival and how Jesus brings the kingdom to earth. Last week, Pastor John talked about how God has something new for us in Matthew 9, and we'll be continuing in Matthew 9 today. But before we get to our text, the passage we're going to read today is all about faith. Faith is fundamental to Christianity. A sermon on faith isn't just for the lifelong Christians in the room. It's not just something that you do at the moment of salvation and then never have faith again, but faith should be an everyday reality for us. So we're going to jump into the text, Matthew 9:18. It says, "As Jesus was saying this, the leader of a synagogue came and knelt before him. 'My daughter has just died,' he said, 'but you can bring her back to life again if you just come and lay your hand on her.' So Jesus and his disciples got up and went with him. Just then, a woman who had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding came up behind him. She touched the fringe of his robe, for she thought, 'If I can just touch his robe, I will be healed.' Jesus turned around, and when he saw her, he said, 'Daughter, be encouraged. Your faith has made you well.' And the woman was healed at that moment. When Jesus arrived to the official's home, he saw the noisy crowd and heard the funeral music. 'Get out,' he told them. 'The girl isn't dead. She's only asleep.' But the crowd laughed at him. After the crowd was put outside, however, Jesus went in and took the girl by the hand, and she stood up. The report of this miracle swept through the entire countryside." So there are two very different people here and two different miracles that occur. The first man we encounter in the other gospel accounts of this story, we find out his name is Jairus. So there's one important detail about Jairus that Matthew mentions, and it says that Jairus was a synagogue leader. This is important because this man would have had respect and authority in the community, but he comes and kneels at Jesus' feet. He comes before him in his deepest, darkest time of need when his daughter has just died, and Jesus is the feet he comes to kneel at. This man would have had access to leaders who knew the Torah really well, who could pray big, bold, and elaborate, beautiful prayers. Yet in his darkest moment, he knew the place he had to go to was the feet of Jesus. Do you look at Jesus the same? When things are falling apart around you, when everything seems to be crumbling in, is Jesus the one you run to? When you're struggling to figure out how to parent your kids, when you have financial problems, when there is illness in your life, where do you run to? Is Jesus the person you go and kneel before? If you know Jesus, like the people in this passage know Jesus, then you would know that he is the only one you'd ever run to. This man asked Jesus to come and heal his daughter and raise her from the dead. And this is a really bold request. If you've ever experienced the sting of death, the heartbreak, then you would understand this man's pain. And the pain of losing a loved one who is supposed to be at your funeral is even more devastating. So this man, in his darkest moments of pain, comes to the feet of Jesus. And the other thing about death is it is so final. If they're a believer, we know that they're going to be in heaven, but on this side of eternity, they're gone. And so he runs to Jesus. Because for Jesus, finality for us is not the same for him. Healing can take place in a moment. Addiction broken, lives mended in just a moment. And the dead raised to life. This man comes to Jesus. He doesn't make a request or asks a question. He simply states a fact. He says, "My daughter has just died, but you can bring her back to life again if you just come and lay your hand on her." Is that how you think of Jesus? When you come to moments in your life where it feels like the enemy has the final say, where finality feels like your reality, where everything is falling apart, where hopelessness begins to take root, do you trust in a moment that should he want to, Jesus can change everything? Jairus was one of these people who had faith that Jesus could do the impossible. And how does Jesus respond? Verse 19, so Jesus and his disciples got up and went with him. Jesus got up and went with him. Jesus was ready to respond. He was ready to respond to this man's faith. Maybe today you feel like you don't have enough faith to believe that God can answer your prayers. But I have some good news for you, is that we serve a God who responds. When we pray to him, our prayers aren't just hitting the ceiling. They're not just going out into the void, but he hears you and he cares about you and he loves you and he responds to your faith. As Jesus is on his way to heal Jairus' daughter, we see another person with bold faith approach Jesus. Verse 20, just then a woman who had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding came up behind him. She touched the fringe of his robe, for she thought, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. She says, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. This woman who had been suffering for 12 years. Some of you in the room are 12. It's your whole life. For 12 years, this woman had been suffering. She was considered a social outcast. Under Levitical law, she was religiously unclean. If she was to touch you or you were to touch her, you would also be considered unclean for a time. And the woman's faith is so bold that she doesn't even need to talk to Jesus. She doesn't need him to lay hands on her. She doesn't need to have him anoint her with oil. She just says, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. What incredible faith this woman had. And Jesus responds. Jesus turned around, and when he saw her, he said, daughter, be encouraged. Your faith has made you well. And the woman was healed at that moment. Jesus does one miracle on his way to do another miracle. You know, sometimes we hear stories like these and we're like, yeah, I know Jesus does miracles. I've read this story before. I've read this in my Bible study. And we let it kind of become mundane to us, like, yeah, Jesus heals. But I want you to think for a moment. This woman had been suffering for 12 years. And in a moment, Jesus heals her and changes everything. Jairus' daughter was dead. But in a moment, Jesus changes everything. And she is raised to life once again. Jesus doesn't stop there. Jesus arrives at the official's home. He saw the noisy crowd. He heard the funeral music. And he says, get out. The girl isn't dead, she's only asleep. But the crowd laughed at him. This crowd is doing what would be normal for people to do after someone has passed away. They're grieving, they're mourning, they're playing music, they're probably reminiscing all the beautiful memories they had with this girl, talking about the ways that she made them laugh or the silly things that she did. So they're doing what's appropriate in the moment because they don't understand who just walked into the room. They don't understand that the Messiah has come in and he's about to change everything for them. So they do something that you would probably do if someone said something so radical and crazy to you. They laughed in his face. Because unlike Jairus, they didn't understand who Jesus was. After the crowd was put outside, however, Jesus went in and took the girl by the hand, and she stood up. And she stood up. The report of this miracle swept through the entire countryside. This girl is dead, but in a moment, she is alive once again. Jairus had faith in Jesus, and Jesus responds to his faith. Jairus and the woman with the issue of blood come to Jesus saying, if you would just come lay hands on my daughter, if I can just touch the hem of his garment. These people had big, bold faith. But it wasn't just about having big faith. It was about where their faith was placed. Their faith was placed in Jesus. When Jesus chose to heal these people, he didn't check their giving record, their church attendance, how many Bible studies they were a part of, how many Bible studies they had done on the YouVersion app. He didn't check how often they served. It was about their faith being placed in him and him alone. We place our faith in a lot of things. You placed your faith in your car that it would get you here to church this morning. Maybe you place faith in your bank account. If I just have enough money and I keep putting enough money in there, everything's going to be okay. Maybe you put faith in your spouse. As long as they love me, everything's going to be okay. Maybe you put faith in your body. As long as this thing's working, it's all good. But the reality is those things can fail us. And the only thing that can never fail us is Jesus. Is your faith today in Jesus alone? The Bible makes it very clear that this is how salvation works. Romans 3:28 says, "For we maintain that a person is justified by faith apart from the works of the law." It's not about our works. It's not about our good deeds. But it's about our faith in Jesus alone. Galatians 2:16, we know that a person is not justified by the works of the law. You're not saved by your good works. That's not going to get you to heaven. But by faith in Jesus Christ. Our salvation is through faith in Jesus alone. Jesus alone. Often our faith consists of Jesus and good works, Jesus and health, Jesus and wealth, Jesus and country. But the Bible makes it very clear our faith needs to be in Jesus and Jesus alone. How do you view Jesus? Is he the one you've placed your faith in? Or is it something or someone else? Maybe it's even in yourself. Where is your faith placed today? Faith isn't something that you do one time at the moment of salvation when you ask Jesus into your life, when you believe in him. But faith should be an everyday reality for us. Trusting him in the difficulty and trusting him on the good days. Putting our faith in him. Jairus and the woman with the issue of blood, they understood this. They knew who Jesus was, and they weren't the only ones. Verse 27. After Jesus left the girl's home, 2 blind men followed along behind him, shouting, "Son of David, have mercy on us." They went right into the house where he was staying, and Jesus asked them, "Do you believe I can make you see?" "Yes, Lord," they told him, "we do." Then he touched their eyes and said, "Because of your faith, it will happen." Then their eyes were opened and they could see. Jesus sternly warned them, "Don't tell anyone about this." But instead, they went out and spread his fame all over the whole region. How could you keep that quiet? If you had been blind, how could you keep that to yourself? That the Messiah has come and he healed you. So Jesus is going from village to village, performing miracles, and more people are coming to him. And these men come to him and say, "Son of David, have mercy on us." This is the first time that Jesus is called the Son of David. This is what the coming Messiah is called in the Old Testament. These men understood who Jesus was. He is the Messiah. The only reason they believed that he could heal them is because they believed he was the Messiah. He was the one they had been waiting for. He was the one they prophesied about. And not just some guy healing people, but God in the flesh had come. And though these men were blind, they saw Jesus more clearly than anyone else. No one else had put their finger on it yet, but these blind men knew the Messiah had come. Now I want you to remember that these blind men understood who Jesus was when we get into these next few verses. Verse 32, when they left, a demon-possessed man who couldn't speak was brought to Jesus. So Jesus cast out the demon, and that man began to speak. The crowds were amazed. Nothing like this has ever happened in Israel, they exclaimed. Jesus does another miracle. But, verse 34, the Pharisee said, he cast out demons because he is empowered by the prince of demons. This incredible miracle takes place. A man who is demon-possessed, his demon is cast out. He's no longer under bondage. He's experienced freedom. And the Pharisees respond by saying, this is the prince of demons? He's empowered by the prince of demons? The Pharisees could not see what was happening right in front of them. The Pharisees knew the Old Testament. They should have known that this was a sign that the Messiah had come. When they were watching, they should have known that blind man being healed, this girl being raised from the dead, demons being cast out. This is the sign. This is what we've been waiting for. The Messiah has come back, but they couldn't see what was right in front of them. They knew all the things. They studied for years of their life. They knew the Old Testament, but they didn't really know him. They had put their faith in God and the law. And their faith in the law was distracting them to see what was right in front of them. These blind men who couldn't even see Jesus, who couldn't even see his miracles, understood that he was the Messiah. They missed out on a miracle. The Pharisees missed out on a miracle because their faith was placed in the wrong thing. And sometimes we come to God and we have our faith in everything else, and we're missing out on the miracles right before us because we're looking directly at our spouse. We're looking directly at our finances, and we're like, this thing can save me. My talent and ability can save me. But our faith needs to be in Jesus alone. Jairus, the woman with the issue of blood, and these men set their faith in Jesus alone. And they experienced incredible miracles because of it. And Jesus responds to their faith. In these verses, we see that God simply responds to the faith of his people, to the faith of those who seek after him, who place their faith in him and him alone. We see him respond to desperate pleas, to a father who is grieving over the loss of his daughter, to a woman who has been suffering for 12 years, to two men, to a man who is demon-possessed. But as I read this passage over and over again, a question began to arise in me, and maybe you've already considered it today. What do I do when I have faith, but my prayers aren't being answered? I know in a room this size, there's likely many people who are walking through difficulty, and you've been crying out to the Lord. You come to the altar every Sunday, you come to every prayer service, and you get anointed over, and you believe with all your heart that Jesus can heal you, that he can deliver you, that he can deliver family members you've been praying for. But it seems like your prayers are going unanswered. If that's you in the room today, I want you to know that you're not alone. There's been things in my life that I've been praying for years. Family members to come to the Lord, family members to be healed, some of our students to be healed. And I get on my knees and I cry out to the Lord. And I believe with all my heart, with everything in me, that he can do it. I've seen him do it before. I've seen him heal people before. I've seen people come back to him. I've seen him change everything in an instant. And I believe it with all my heart. But I'm still waiting on my miracle. So what do we do when we truly believe that God can heal and save and deliver, and we believe it with all our heart, but we're still suffering? When we still don't see the answer to our prayers? Often we read passages like Matthew 9, or you hear about other people being saved, and you say, God, why not me? Do they have more faith than me? Is there something I'm doing wrong? We start to place blame on ourselves. Maybe I'm not a good enough Christian. Maybe I need to do this or do that, and that will get you to answer my prayer. And we hear about this girl being raised from the dead and this woman who was in pain for 12 years. And some of you have been in pain for much longer than 12 years. And you come to the Lord time and time again. Say, God, please, I believe you can do it. I have faith, but why am I not seeing you answer my prayers? I think of Job. In the Old Testament, a man who loved God, who devoted his life to him, and in a moment, everything was stripped away. And even still, Job is crying out to God. He's like, God, what is going on? These people are telling me it's because I've sinned. I haven't sinned. What is going on? And for a while, God is silent as Job cries out to him. There is this great mystery of suffering. Everyone in this room probably understands there's something in your life you've been praying for time and time again, and you haven't seen your miracle yet. And there's this great mystery of suffering because God doesn't always come and deliver us as quickly as we'd like. But what he does promise is that he'll be with us in our suffering. One of my favorite Christian artists, Mike Donahue, says, I am held together by the belief I don't serve a genie God, high and out of reach, peddling solutions while limiting requests. But instead, I walk with a God who served, who comes down, who sympathizes with my every need. While I suspect I'll never understand his timing, I trust his heart. And I take comfort in a king who suffers with me. Though we may not see the answer to our suffering, he suffers with us. He walks with us in the midst of our pain. He understands. He is with you as you cry out to him. As you've asked time and time again, as you come to these altars and you weep before him and you believe with all your heart, God, you can heal me. He's still right there in the midst of it, and he hears you and he's walking with you. And some of us will never see our miracle on this side of eternity. But when we place our faith in him, he will walk with us in our suffering. And we know that one day there will be an end to suffering, that there is hope in the midst of our pain. Revelation 21:4 says, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever. So though you may be dealing with suffering today, I hope this gives you hope. Continue to press in, continue to have faith, continue to believe that he's going to heal you, that he's going to deliver your family members, that they're going to come to know him. Keep believing. But even if it never happens, even if we don't see our miracle on this side of eternity, there is hope for the future. There is hope that there will be more pain, there will be no more crying or suffering. So will you place your faith in him today? Where is your faith placed? You might be sitting in this room thinking, Abby, I've been a Christian for a long time. My faith is in Jesus. I want to ask you, is it in Jesus alone, or is it Jesus and? Have you added all these ands on to your faith in Jesus? I believe in Jesus, but I also need this, and this, and then I'll be okay. Is your faith in Jesus alone?
Thank you so much for tuning into this message today. I hope it was an encouragement to you. If you'd like to make a comment or tell us maybe something that you learned from the message or a way that it impacted you, you can comment below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're ever in the Springfield area, we'd love to see you on a Sunday morning at 9 or 10:45 at 2020 East Battlefield. We hope to see you there.